half term is 2 days away. And you may be in the camp that's looking forward to it because you think, wow, my child, they're going to use this time effectively to get ahead for their exams. Or you're in the camp that's looking forward to these 2 weeks with dread because whatever you seem to have tried in the past revision-wise doesn't seem to work for your ADHD child. And you already know there's going to be battles trying to get them to sit and revise. It's a tough thing to know that what you've tried in the past, all of the articles and all of the research and all of the best study hacks, they don't seem to work. ADHD brains don't struggle with willpower. It's not even really a motivation thing, nor is it an organizational thing. It's a different wiring thing. And we're working in a society that's just not constructed to support this type of wiring. And that means the typical solution of beautiful timetables or the Pomodoro method or the flashcard method, these things may not suit your child. So what do? We adapt. And that is what today is all about. Today we are building a revision schedule that works specifically for a child with an ADHD brain. And I'm really excited because it is all rooted in the most well-known and accessible research around working memory, attention, and learning that exists out there. By the end of this episode, you will not only have a guide that will support your child through their revision that suits their ADHD brain, but you're also going to have tools and environment hacks as well as revision tactics that are going to move the needle. So, grab your cup of tea or your cup of coffee and join me. It's just you, me, and a little bit of science. And together, we're going to create the plan that will actually work for your child that has an ADHD brain. Is that it? We might need more today. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to find us. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button as well as the notification button so you don't miss anything related to parenting, mental health, and the intersection of academics. I'm going to be here on YouTube or over on Apple and Spotify every other week at 7 a.m. delivering the actionable tools that are science backed. So let's waste no time and let's get into it. So I said early on that ADHD is not a willpower issue, that it's more of a wiring is a little bit different scenario, which means if we have different wiring, we need different tactics. It's not a problem. It just means that we need to pivot a little bit. I'm going to paint a picture for you. What happens with most of our families is that on the Sunday of half term, you sit with your child and you have a nice piece of paper out in front of you and you're like, right, we have revision to do. Let's map it all out. You've got colored pencils, you've got rulers, like the, what's it called? Like the paper chase loving, do you remember them? The paper chase loving version of you that loves pens and papers is really in their element. And yet by Tuesday, that gorgeous plan is not working anymore. And it's not because you didn't try. Of course you did. You spent your Sunday mapping out a plan. And it's not because your child didn't try hard enough. I'm sure they sat down and they gave it their best go. But that plan was not built for your child. So here is where I'm going to bring in our first expert, Russell Barkley. If you haven't watched any of his stuff, please make sure you go and watch his stuff on YouTube after this, of course. But also how he frames ADHD has been incredibly powerful in my understanding, but also the families that we support as well. Now, he describes ADHD as doing what you know you have to do in the exact moment that it needs to be done. He talks about the ADHD brain as a now brain. And that's because the ADHD brain lives almost entirely in the present moment. Have you noticed that even if you give your child consequences that are a little bit further down the line, even if they're attached to something that they desperately love, they have such a hard time changing their behavior in the present moment to avoid that consequence later, because future planning, thinking about later, doesn't come naturally. So that exam that's in May or June or next year literally has no register in their brain. And if it does, it's a logical one, but not one that has enough power to change or alter their behavior in the present moment. Stay with me here. I know this is a little bit sciencey, but actually this is the bridge between your frustration and their action. Barkley also frames ADHD fundamentally as a disorder of executive functioning, the ability to use self-awareness to guide our behavior towards future goals. Knowing this, when your child knows that they have to revise, but they're still playing guitar or absolutely digging their heels in, this isn't disobedience or a character flaw. It is their brain not seeing that if they don't change now, they're going to get a result that they're not pleased with later. That's an executive functioning gap playing out in real time for us. And once you understand that, you are going to stop asking yourself and ruminating over the frustration of why will they not just do it? Why can't they just start? Why are they not motivated? All of those thoughts that swirl around your mind and that you call me overwhelmed and frustrated about, once we see that this is an executive functioning gap and we acknowledge that their brains aren't wired for future projection, but they live so wonderfully in the present moment, that is when we can start changing things to find real positive results that will not only support their exam process, but better yet, serve them far beyond into their adult life. Like, this is the whole game. This is the whole way that we succeed as parents. We acknowledge that the executive functioning skills need to now be external. They can't come from their internal world. Instead, we need to put them in place externally. We need to talk about what we're doing so that as they grow and develop into adults, they can start putting things in place to support themselves as well. And that is exactly what our revision schedule is going to do. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you have likely heard of the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve was around in like the 1880s. It was brought about by a guy named Ebbinghaus. And in short, it talks about how when we don't revisit new learning, we forget it. And he came up with this stat through loads of studies that showed that within the first 24 hours, we can actually forget up to 70% of what we learn. And Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve isn't just for a neurodivergent brain. It's for brains across the board. Now I want to introduce us to Barbara Oakley. She created an online course called Learning How to Learn. It is so popular, and for good reason, because she beautifully explains this concept through a metaphor. Her metaphor is, if we are walking on a new path in the forest, the first time that we're there, everything feels overwhelming, everything looks the same, and we're just trying to find our way through the forest. Like, our head is down, we're just focused on getting to the end. But the next day, if we go back out, that tree looks a little bit more familiar. Oh yeah, I remember that branch there. And then the next day, we start to know when to turn right, when to turn left ahead of time. And as we repeatedly walk the same path in the forest, we notice that our ability to navigate through to the end becomes something that becomes almost instinctual. We don't even have to think about it anymore. And the reason it happens is because through repetition, memory consolidates. If your mind has just wandered off to your child's notebook that they haven't opened since Monday, that's okay. Stick with me, because what we're learning about now together is what will help them to open that notebook and revise with less stress and frustration. Let's keep going. So here's where I want to introduce our third person that has helped me to create the exact ADHD revision guide that is going to support your child. It's actually 3 people. It's the 3 people that wrote the book Make It Stick: Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel. If you haven't come across this book, it's definitely on my top 10 recommend list because it's really well written, but also it challenges so many of the ideas that are widespread about how memory works, how learning works, how we need to revise. They actually show and argue against typical strategies like highlighting and rereading notes, and show the exact route into encoding and putting something into long-term memory. And in fact, the best way that we can revise is when we put in effort. It's actually the amount of effort that our brain needs to exert that signals to our brain, hey, this is important, we want to remember this. And so it goes, gotcha, no problem, we will remember this. And it puts it into long-term memory. Knowing this, we need to embed these core principles into how they're going to spend their time revising. Now, if you want more, we have plenty of videos that dive deep into these revision study methods here, and I'll link them down in the show notes as well. Let's reflect on an ADHD brain. A child who is being shown new information may not have full attention to receive the new information. They may be half paying attention or a quarter paying attention, or they have anxiety present because it's new that's taking up space on their mental whiteboard. And so the amount of information that they've actually just reviewed is less than we think. Therefore, what do? Well, we need to shorten the gap between the first time and the next time they get exposed to this information. We can't wait a week. We really can't even wait a couple of days, especially at the beginning. We need to revisit sooner and much more frequently, especially in the early days, while that puzzle is starting to build together. The Pomodoro method. Okay, so now that we know that we need to lower our amount of space in between our revision, I want to counter something that is plastered all over the internet, but may actually not work for your child's learning needs. And that is the Pomodoro method. Now, the Pomodoro method is this technique where we split up our active time and our break time into chunks. Typically 25 minutes of working time followed by a 5-minute break. That cycle is repeated 3 times, and the feedback is usually quite positive. However, what we've noticed with the students we work with through Maverick Education is that this particular method tends to backfire. It doesn't suit their now brains. 25 minutes is potentially a little bit too long for them to keep actively engaged. So does that mean we just scrap something that seems to work for everybody else? Absolutely not. Instead, we modify it. We just shorten the amount of time. Daniel Willingham, who wrote Why Kids Don't Like School, which is very good, very readable, makes a point around memory being the residue. What does he say? Memory is the residue of thought, which is that you only remember what you've cognitively engaged with. So if we don't spend any time engaging with, questioning, pondering, wondering about something, we're not going to be able to remember it. Therefore, half-present revision time, where we're just highlighting things, we're just passively rereading our notes, but actually thinking about something different, it's not going to leave any residue. You may have clocked an hour's worth of revision, but it's probably produced about 10 minutes of active learning and encoding. So let's do that. Let's sit with that for a second. Memory is the residue of thought. That reframe alone is worth the price of this episode, and this episode is free, so you're welcome. The other problem that I have with the Pomodoro method is the level of re-entry effort. Every single time that timer goes off, we get a break, we get a 5-minute break. But when that timer goes off, our break timer goes off, we have to bring ourselves back to the task and re-engage. And for a now brain, self-starting is one of the executive functioning skills that we really struggle with. Multiple restarts in a row means generating that dopamine signal from scratch multiple times in order to get it done. And that's exhausting. That is so exhausting to pull yourself to do something that you have no drive to do, and to have to do that numerous times in a row. You are going to be tapped out before you even start to push your brain to learn something new. And this is why we've seen a couple of our students at the very beginning when we were working with them and using the Pomodoro method. This is why we saw that it was no longer working. So what we did was adapt it for our students, for the children that are in front of us. We shortened it, 7 to 15 minutes. That window works incredibly well for our ADHD learners. It sounds wild, but it's actually long enough to make significant progress because they are fully locked in. And the break they get after, that is probably more important than the time that they are revising. That break is so important for their brain. There are different ways that we can approach a break depending on what goal we are aiming for. That's another video entirely. But the specific break that we tend to use with our ADHD learners when we're doing our 7 to 15 minute sprint is a movement break right after. A movement break is really powerful because it helps them shift their energy, reconnect to their body, and because they're moving, we're adding more oxygen to the brain, which means that prefrontal cortex is going to be fully oxygenated the next time we sit down to do some learning. The highest impact study methods. Now that we understand why and how things need to adapt for an ADHD brain who has working memory and executive functioning deficits, we need to now build out that guide, build out the actual revision process for them. This is where the make it stick principles actually come into play. Now, Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel identified 2 things as the highest impact study methods. The first is spaced repetition, and the second is retrieval practice. Like I said, if you've been around here for a while, you've probably heard those words a couple of times. We're going to dive into them a little bit today, but don't forget you have this video that you can go to next. Okay, so we have a spaced repetition revision loop. Now, this loop is incredibly powerful for your child's success. So if you can't write it down, make sure you head down in the show notes because I have it there for you. You can print it out, pop it on your fridge after you filled it out with your child, and I have no doubt it's going to make a huge impact on the overall tone of the house, but also their progress. So imagine your child is in year 6 and they are getting ready for their SATs. They might be doing some spelling. Day 1, they learn it. It's a micro task. It's 7 to 15 minutes where they go through and learn the words. They can use a variety of different methods to do so. You can use flashcards. You can do a blurt. So read them, have a couple of minutes to look through, practice the spelling, hide them, and then write down what you remember. You can create a mind map about a concept so you remember big elephants. What is it? Big elephants can always use small escapes or exits because, or coming up with other different spelling techniques to make them remember how to make it work. We need their brain to be actively engaging with the learning here. It's still day 1, but a few hours later, perhaps around dinner time, you're just going to review it one more time. You can very easily just say, right, can you tell me 3 things that you remember from this morning's spelling? Go. It could be in the car, at dinner, on a walk, whatever it is. And you can also gamify it. Some of our students and families have this process where they've made it into this game where your child gets bonus points for being able to identify more things correctly, and at the end they have this big reward, because the reward is not that they revised, it was that they revised consistently, putting in good effort, and showed progress. And that is what we really want to highlight for our children as being something to celebrate. Now, the benefit of this same day retrieval is that it acknowledges that 70% goes after 24 hours, right? It supports our ADHD learner and their metacognition. Day 2, they're just going to retrieve that information. You're not there to relearn it, you're just there to see what sticks. So in the morning when they get up, they've got a nice page in front of them, or maybe there's blanks, fill in the blanks for them to annotate an image of, I don't know, a cell when they're getting ready for biology and GCSE, and they have to write in what they remember. This helps us to see what they retained and what needs to be reviewed later. That's a really powerful feedback tool for us. So that way, in the next session, which will be on day 4, the actual application to see what I'm able to remember, that is when you're able to test yourself, to actually go through and see, right, I learned it on day 1 and I reviewed it at the end of the day. Day 2, I actively had to pull that information from my memory, and I saw what I knew, what I didn't, and I noticed the gap and what I still need to review more intentionally. Now, this can be done with flashcards, it can be done with a mind map, with a blurt, with a fill in the blank, with a diagram, or you can put on your best Quizmaster showcase and do a family style approach to revision. However you plan on doing it, the process or the intention here is to keep it short and sharp. Now, last but not least of that first week, we've got day 7. This is the day that you are going to teach the theory. This is what Willingham calls transfer, where you are going to consolidate or grab the information that your brain has processed and you're going to explain it to someone else. Now, in that explanation, you are opening yourself up to questions, and you are allowing yourself to go from just pretending that you know something in your mind to having to explain it. So to process it enough for it to translate into words that someone else understands. The active revision is going to explicitly see what stuck and what didn't, which revision that's silent is going to hide. It doesn't matter if they're teaching it to the dog down here, to a stuffed toy, to a family member, to a rock. None of it matters, but they still need to go through that process. Moving into week 2, we've got day 10. So a couple of days later, this is where we are actually going to use that information. We're going to look at a past paper question that actually requires us to apply the information that we've been reviewing. Okay, if you've wandered off slightly, that's okay. I was going through quite a lot of like nitty-gritty details, but that is the exact revision schedule that you're going to use with your child across all of the subjects that they need to study for this half term in order to ensure that they get a break, rest, and actual impactful revision methods. Next up, I'm going to be talking to you about the exact thing that you use on day 1 of half term. So now that we've covered the spaced repetition part, like the actual timings that you would go through with your child, I'd like to now look at the application part of revision, and that is active recall. Let me walk you through the active recall methods that specifically support ADHD brains. One of my favorites is blurting. Blurting is, I don't know, it's It's fun, it's a little bit of a competition, it's visual, it's auditory, it has all of these different elements to it that just, to me, it is the best way to do active recall. Blurting is when we have an idea that we need to revise, and we either watch a video, we read a part in our notes, or we listen to someone explain it in a podcast, and then we put that input away and write out everything that we can remember in detail about what we just listened to or learned. There's no structure required. It can be absolutely random. It doesn't have to follow an order. It doesn't even have to be full sentences. We're just getting as much as you remember down on paper to see what stuck. Then after it's finished, we go back to our original input, so whether it's the video, a podcast, or notes, and we, in a different color, add to our blurt page everything that we missed. So we're finishing with our original color of pen of things that we remembered, and then a second layer of information in a second color of pen, writing down all of the things that we missed and we need to now remember. This works brilliantly for ADHD brains. It has a clear start and a clear end. There's only gentle time pressure. And the reveal at the end is a small but powerful dopamine hit. And that is what our now brain thrives on. Number 2, the second active recall method that works best for our ADHD learners is a flashcard sprint. You may have heard experts talking about flashcards, and I have a love-hate relationship with them. I love a flashcard, but only if they are used intentionally and effectively. So let's dig into what that means now. The best way to use your flashcards is loud, not quiet. I don't want you to just actively be in the back, kind of yep. I want you to out loud say what the answer is and have someone buddy check it or be honest with yourself when it's wrong, because that out loud processing is doubly checking understanding. So how do flashcards work? Well, my view of it is that you would have a maximum of 10 because this is short sprints. You've got 10 cards in front of you. On the front, they have the definition or the word or the clue to you. On the back, they have what you need to know and remember. So we start, we look at it, and then we say out loud what the answer is. If we get a card and we weren't able to say what was on the reverse, it goes into the review later pile. Now you can be even more intentional about this and have different piles depending on whether it was easy for you to remember, difficult for you to remember and you didn't get all of it, or you didn't remember at all. And this is going to determine how frequently you revisit those 3 piles. So you check yourself, okay, that was easy, it goes in the later pile. We might revisit that in a couple of days. You check yourself again, ooh, that one was a little bit trickier. I didn't get all of the words, but I understood the concept, so I'm going to put that in my middle pile. I'm going to revisit it sooner than my easy pile, but not today or tomorrow. Then I check myself again. Ooh, actually, I have no idea what this is. I check, I read it, okay. And then it goes inside my review it tonight before bed pile. Now, the sprint aspect of flashcards is what actually turns this into something that an ADHD brain will thrive in. It's the fact that it's gamified. If we say go through your pile as quick as you can and make sure that it goes inside the right pile at the end, we are creating a race. We are creating a dopamine drive that really sparks their interest and their excitement level. The third method of active recall that we love for our ADHD learners is the voice memo recall. This is very similar to a blurt, but this time it is all audio. I want you to take your phone out, push record, and voice note everything that you remember about that specific topic that you're reviewing in this 7 to 15 minute work sprint. I want you to pretend that you're teaching it to me. There's no script in front of you. There's no resources in front of you. And you are doing this from memory. And then we're going to play it back. And while you play it back, you're going to notice what was missing based on the notes in front of you. This works in particular for ADHD learners because they are often stronger verbally than they are with the written word. So being able to explain things out loud without having to write them down, it automatically takes away a layer of effort so that they can still engage with the work without it feeling too overwhelming or too much of a hurdle to get the task done. And the final active recall process that we love for our ADHD learners is I see you back there, is the 1 question past paper sprint. Many of our students say that the idea of writing a past paper is incredibly overwhelming. And so we take away the overwhelm by asking them to write a 1 question answer. Obviously, we're going to go for our bigger mark application questions, but we do it. It's timed, it's still in exam conditions, but the process is limited down to that 1 question. This is incredibly powerful for our students preparing for those bigger exams because it still gives them exposure to past papers without it feeling incredibly overwhelming. And last but not least, we have one of the most effective for our neurodivergent students, which we've covered in episode 6, and that is dual coding. So not only just writing something, but drawing it out, putting it either in a comic strip, in a diagram, writing it out in like a mind map vision, anything that allows our students to not only process the theory and the logic that they're trying to understand, but also create a visual representation of that new learning as well. It means that they're encoding the information in 2 different pathways, 2 different ways. Now, the common thread that you may have noticed in all of these active recall processes that we love for our ADHD learners is that they are all finite. It's not you're now revising science for 45 minutes, off you go, tell me when you're done. But rather you're doing a 5-minute blurt on the water cycle, go. That complete check feeling is going to provide such a rush of dopamine, of accomplishment, of sense of achievement that it fuels all of the other tasks as well. So these shorter, finite tasks are what allow our students to engage in revision in a way that supports their need for external scaffolded support for executive functioning. So now that we understand the process of how we lay everything out and what specific tools we're going to use to actively revise in those time spaces, I want to dive into one that is really underused, but so powerful. And that is body doubling. Now, body doubling is very simply just being present while someone is doing something that impacts or adds pressure to their working memory. So for a child, this may be that they are revising at the same table that you are doing something else. It's the idea of having physical presence. Now, what we need to make sure that we acknowledge is that it's not you sitting beside them, looking over their shoulder, reading out the questions for them. That's different. Body doubling is I'm going to sit across the table from you and I'm going to get my own work done. You are going to sit there. You are going to get this 5-minute blurt about the water cycle done, and then we can check in with each other. But I'm just here as someone else who's working in the same space as you. Now, for an ADHD brain, this is really powerful because the presence of someone else actually regulates attention. It creates like a mild social accountability. There's someone who's actually watching me start and stop and get distracted and come back to my paper. And it actually, that very slight acknowledgement that someone is there helps us to stay focused. James Clear, who is the writer of Atomic Habit, he talks a lot about environmental hacks in order to allow our habits to take place powerfully and with ease. And I think that this counts as an environmental hack. Putting someone in the same space as you needing to do your work, that is essentially designing the environment for an ADHD brain. You don't have to change anything. You're not adding more willpower. You're not creating a more beautiful revision table. You're not even adding more amount of revision that they're doing. The only thing that's happening is that you're sharing a space. You do something that's important to you, and they are doing what they need to do on their revision guide. This actually changes the environment, so less willpower is needed. I know what you're thinking. Sarah Lynn, this sounds a little bit too simple. Will it actually work? Won't my child just draw me into doing their homework with them? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it's important that the boundary remains clear in order for this to work. The boundary has to be, I can read what you have to do for you before you start, if that is something that you're comfortable with as the parent. But after I read it, you need to get started, and I'm going to sit here and I need to get my own work done. We're holding each other accountable. It's a powerful thing for us to do as a family, and I'm looking forward to seeing the great results that you have at the end of this task. When we know that, when we acknowledge that this is not about you teaching them, so you don't need to know about Macbeth's greatest flaw or how to wire a plug for GCSE physics, it means that you can be doing what you have to do while they are doing their own task as well. Now, for teens who won't sit with their parent, which honestly does happen, there are study with me videos on YouTube where you're just watching or observing someone quietly sitting, ticking off their to-do list, while you, on the other side, are going to be doing the same. Now, I'm happy to do that if that would be of interest to you. Just drop it down in the comments if you think that could be helpful for your child. Some of our teens have also talked about silent video calls with their friends. Now, this one's a little bit more tricky because it means that they need to have a level of accountability to one another, to not just start talking and become a social conversation. But if both of the parties agree that this is something that they want to powerfully put in place to support both of them, it could be a really great tool. I know it sounds too simple, but the nervous system is social, and social presence is really regulating. A great way to check to see if this would work for your child is if they start well when you're with them, and then that effort and the effectiveness of their work starts to drift as you give them independence or as you leave that space. This might be a great indication that they could do well with some social regulation. We've looked at various active recall methods that are going to ensure the best quality of revision. We've looked at environmental hacks to make sure that we are really supporting their overall productivity. Now it's time to build that half-term revision plan. And it comes from James Clear. And this is where he talks about designing the environment so it doesn't rely on willpower at all. Sarah Lynn, what do you mean that we're not going to now build a revision timetable? I thought that's what this video was for. Don't worry, it's okay. We are going to get to that goal. But this process of designing the environment is the key. I swear to you, it is the foundational key that is going to make the biggest difference. So stick with me. When we talk about scheduling revision, we say Tuesday, 10 a.m. biology. This requires your child to self-start, choose their subject within biology, find all of their material, and select a method in order to engage in that revision. All of those things put in so many obstacles when we just schedule revision. For a now brain, all of those obstacles are the reason why they're not getting it done. There's so much required before they even start the active revision process. So scheduling conditions, which is what we're going to do, it looks a little bit different. It says instead, Tuesday, 10 a.m., kitchen table, mom's nearby, my phone's away, the timer is on for 10 minutes. I have my blurt cards that I already have chosen that I want to revise. Everything is predetermined before Tuesday at 10 a.m. Their only job is to sit down and start. Now, James Clear, he calls this reducing friction. And for an ADHD brain, that's huge. It lowers the executive functioning skills that they need to apply to this scenario. It is the single most powerful thing that we can do. And it's not just James Clear who talks about this. Willingham's cognitive load theory actually fits in perfectly here. He writes about how when the brain is spending energy on organizing and planning, there's actually less available for actually doing the thing. Have you ever heard about Steve Jobs only ever wearing the same outfit every single day? It's because he was minimizing the amount of effort needed on making choices so that he had more brain power, more cognitive power to apply that to important decision making in his day-to-day. That pre-setup actually removes a huge mountain of effort that's required. Night before you makes all the decisions. Now you sits down and gets it done. Now you may have heard about this as eat the frog, or on Sunday night, sit down and write your plan for the entire week, or finding ways to set up your environment, like put your gym clothes out the night before, or pack your lunch the night before to reduce the friction between you getting something good and healthy rather than not having enough time. These are all things that we do in our adult day-to-day lives to help us. So we are just going to use that same information that serves us well to support our child who has an ADHD now brain. I'm going to give you an outline, almost like a checklist of things that are going to help you and your child create their very personalized and very impactful revision process. So the first thing within our ADHD revision framework is the same time. We want a consistent time that they are going to sit down to revise in order to engage with the work. Mid-morning tends to work well for a lot of our students after they've had time to wake up, have breakfast, and maybe even get outside. Then they sit down and they have that sprint. Now we're going to give them 45 minutes total in order to go through various different chunks of learning. Within those 45 minutes, here is how you can break it up. 10 minutes of active revision. The method is predetermined, followed by a 5-minute break. Let's make it a movement break, so they're moving to get back into their chair. We're going to repeat that. 10 minutes active revision, topic and method already decided, and our 5-minute movement break. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to do 5 minutes of active retrieval, active recall from yesterday's work. The method is already chosen. Then 5 minutes to record what was already done. It can be a tick list if that's easier. Plus, it helps them to feel the win. Who doesn't love ticking something off of a to-do list? We're keeping this light but impactful. So 2 to 3 subjects every day, but we're rotating between them for each of those 3 categories. So there's consistent repetition throughout the weeks, but within that 45-minute block, we are doing long division, water cycle, history. I don't teach history, so I don't know what would be there, but you understand the gist. Now, the priority subjects, the ones that they either struggle the most with or the questions that give us the highest marks, those are the ones that get the priority slots at the beginning of the week. And then they get 1 bank day per week. 1 day that is just full recovery. They get to do whatever they want. And the reason why we do this is not because we're promoting laziness, but instead we are giving their nervous system a moment to regulate, to process, and to relax. As a family, you're teaching resilience, growth mindset, effectiveness without promoting an all or nothing mentality that leads to burnout. This framework requires a little bit of pre-setup. So we have some pre-set up rules to follow. The night before, we have to sit together and choose everything that we're going to do. This can either be done on a Sunday for the week, but I like to do it at the end of the night, almost as like a wind down, preparing for what's coming process. If I see that on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, I have 45 minutes, 3 slots, 2 that are active, engaged methods, active recall, and 1 that is retrieval, I know that I would like to focus my energy on Macbeth. So I'm going to look at my flashcards that look at Lady Macbeth specifically as a powerful woman or powerful character. And I'm going to do a flashcard sprint. The second one tells me that I need to practice my math, and I know that it's simultaneous equations, so I'm actually going to do a drill of 2 different exam questions, so that way there I can check my answer compared to the mark scheme. And the third one is going to be retrieval. Well, yesterday, or I guess today, because I'm pre-planning, so today I looked at communicable diseases and I went through a blurt of the difference between bacteria and viruses, and I did okay, but I want to practice my understanding of the difference and the different examples, so I'm going to do that in my retrieval. So I plan all of that out ahead of time, so that when I wake up in the morning, I sit myself down at the table, potentially I've got a parent in the room with me for body doubling, and I just crack on and I know what to do. This sounds like there's a lot of effort in it, but actually there's way less effort than the battle of trying to get your child to start something they don't want to start. And I'm going to share with you some scripts or templates of how you can bring this up to your child. Like I said, I want to give you a few scripts now that you can use to help support your child in adapting to this new way that you're going to revise. Here's a couple of things that have worked for our families. When they won't start, instead of saying, "You need to revise today," try something like, "I'm setting up the kitchen table in 5 minutes. I'll have your cards out. You don't have to do a lot. Just come and do 10 minutes. You're reducing the activation energy here. We're removing decisions. It's not if you'd like, or what do you revise, or what do you need to look at. You're doing the output because you've already planned it the night before together. You're being that external scaffold that Barkley mentioned as being imperative for an ADHD brain. When they lose focus mid-session, instead of saying, "Come on, you've only done 5 minutes," try instead, "Okay, let's pause for a second, 2 minutes of movement, and then we're going to go back into it. Let's go grab some water." You're not fighting the drift. Instead, you're giving them a resource. When they start to drift, connect them to their body, oxygenate that brain, and then guide them gently back to restarting. When they refuse entirely, instead of, "Just try, you're going to regret this in June." Okay, not now, but pull out your calendar and tell me what time specifically today we're going to book it in, because I want that notification to pop up to you. So what time today is going to feel less difficult for us to sit down for your revision? Remember, future consequences don't land with an ADHD now brain. What is the most important is preserving the relationship that you have with them and keeping that door open. And if that schedule falls apart midweek, instead of, "We've already lost 3 days now, we need to catch up," try this one instead. "Right, we had a slow start. That's fine. Let's start today." The shame spiral is one of the most common reasons why half-term revision falls apart completely. But your calm reframe is what gets them back in the game. Okay, I know this is a lot, especially because it's new and maybe counter to what you know. So here is my challenge. I'd like for you to pick 2 subjects. Just pick 2 of them and try this with me. Pick 2 subjects the night before, talk about what is priority to be reviewed. Go through and decide which active recall method your child wants to use in order to engage with it. Whether they want to do blurting, a voice note, drawing it out, they get to decide all of that before they actually do it. Pick a time that suits everyone and give it a go. 10 minutes per subject 3 times with a 5-minute break. That will allow your child some very intentional time engaging with the subject. This is not meant to be rigid and overly structured. This is about supporting your family in reducing the battles that come with getting future plans accomplished with now behaviors. We're limiting the amount of effort that needs to go into it. We're not trying to sprint through, we're just trying to find consistency. If this video is landing for you and you want to go a little bit deeper, I want to point you in a very specific direction. The single best next video for you is episode 6 of the Mindful Toolbox podcast. It's all about what makes memory stick. This is where you go into the neuroscience of how memory actually works before we add on the layer of ADHD. Watching this video and that one next is going to give you a really clear view of what allows someone to remember something and effective ways that you can support your child in accomplishing that. It's one of our most watched episodes, and I think you'll be able to see why. Following right after that is episode 7. It goes in and adds that layer of ADHD. It's how memory works for our neurodivergent brains. Right, friends, you are all set to head into this half-term revision marathon with all of the tools necessary to see impactful progress and a calmer culture at home. I'm really excited to hear what specifically worked for you in terms of active recall. Let me know in the comments down below. It'd be so great to see which strategies support our children the most. And if you have any other things that are really working for your ADHD child, drop them down below. This is a community, and I would love to see what supports your family too. Next episode, episode 23, is dyslexia and spelling hacks, because let's be honest, the read, write, check, cover method, it's been failing our children way too long. And now it's about time we get some practical tools that will help. Until then, take care, go slow, and enjoy the next 2 weeks. We'll see you soon.